My name is Lakshay Anand, and I'll be talking about my interview experience at UPSC Bhawan on 6th of May 2022. Before I start with my interview experience, I will tell about myself so that you also know what all the parameters they had before themselves uh, in my DAF detailed application form to judge me as a suitable candidate for the civil services. So, as you all know, that I have done my BTech in electrical engineering, and then I did my masters in medieval Indian history from Delhi University, Ramjas College, Department of History. Before this, I cleared some competitive exams like JEE, uh, SSC CGL, UPSC CDS, and now UPSC Civil Services Examination. My hobbies that I mentioned in my DAF were reading world literature, writing letters, writing poetries, interacting with new people, learning new languages, and sketching. Besides this, in my service preferences, I only filled Indian Foreign Services as my first preference and Indian Administrative Services. Besides that, I didn't fill any other services. So it was like around 17, 18 services were not opted by me. Only two services were opted by me. So this is my background on which the interview went around. And regarding which board I got Mr. R.N. Chaube sir's board. And Chaube sir, as you all know, is very famous for not giving marks in the UPSC interviews. I scored 182 marks out of 275 marks for the interview. And I think it's one of the highest for Chaube sir's board this year. So, without wasting much time, I'll be starting with my interview. So, I entered in a room, and then the room, I was the first person to be interviewed that day in the morning. In fact, Chobe sir also didn't come when I reached there. And when I reached there, people were waiting for him. So, Chobe sir came, and then he called me in the room. The room was a big seminar room with an oval shaped table on which on the one end Chobe sir was sitting, and in the center of the table, right at the center, I was sitting. Two of the interview member were on the left side of Chobe sir and two on the right side of the Chobe sir. Uh, One of the member was IIT Delhi's director. Another member was a historian, renowned historian, Professor Upinder Singh, and other two members were, I think, very renowned civil servants. Anyways, the moment I entered the interview room, Chobe asked me to take my seat as usual. He introduced himself. He asked me to calm down. He told me that this is not an interview; it's a personality test, and I need not to worry if I don't know any answer. Even he don't know many answers, and all that matters is I am comfortable. So if I don't feel comfortable at all, I just let him know. So this is how it started, and then he asked me the first question. He asked me in the typical Chobeser style to introduce myself, and I introduced myself. Then he asked me that Lakshay, you are our Lakshay. What is your Lakshay? So I told him, sir, to spread happiness in the world immediately, and he smiled with along with all the members. So it's my surname. That's why I said to spread Anand in the world. So he said wordplay. So smilingly, and I said yes, sir. Thereafter, he asked me what is the difference between Naxalism and terrorism. So I told him that Naxalism and terrorism differ in their motives. Then he counter questioned on it. He asked me, but they can have the same motive on regionalism issues. So I told him, sir, we can appease the Naxalites, but we cannot appease the terrorists by dialogue. Then he moved to the next question. Then he moved to the next question, and the question was, "Have you heard about this phrase, less government, more governance?" So I told him, "Yes, sir. Minimum government and maximum governance is the flagship mission of the government of India." Then he counter questioned on it. What is it about? I told him about the basics: that devolution, decentralization, less intermediaries, citizen-centric services. Then he again asked me one quote or one phrase. He asked me, "Have you heard of this thing, mainstreaming of tribals?" I said, yes, sir. He asked me, what is it about? So I told him that it's about civilizing the tribals, developing them. It's one of the approach of the development of the tribes. Then he asked me, do you support mainstreaming? Are you against it? So I gave a balanced answer. I told him, sir, it can be done in a regulated way where we can develop the tribals in their own on their own parameters. Like we can provide them their forest rights and all, and so on. So he asked me then, can you tell me what are the PVTGs? I told him that they are the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. 75 of them are in India. Then he asked me, can you name any five PVTGs of Andaman and Nicobar? Then I told him Champagnes, Organs, the Great Andamanis, Jarawas, and Sentinelese. I told him all the four names, five names, and he moved on to the next member that he could ask me the question. So the next member was the director of IIT Delhi, and he asked me, since I am from an engineering background, he asked me a lot of question on engineering, and this is for all of you to understand that it does not matter if you know any question or not. You should be honest if you don't know. I'll tell you, he asked me six questions, and I was not able to answer five out of six questions. I only answered one question of him, and still I got good marks. So it's not about how much you know, but how well you know what you know and what you don't know. How well you know what you don't know. So you should accept your mistake. That, sir, I am sorry. I don't know about it. I'll read about it, and you should move forward. So the first question this person asked me is that, what is your opinion about farmers empowerment? So I told him my opinion, some generic points on farmer empowerment, and uh, then he moved forward. He asked me role of FPO, farmer producing organization, in farmers empowerment. I told him. Then he asked me the difference between FPO and FPC. I didn't know this, so I said, sir, sorry, sir, I don't know the answer to this question. Then he asked another question: can you name any FPOs in Maharashtra which makes wine? So I could not answer this question as well. I pardon myself. Uh, then he asked me something related to the difference between captain of air, water, and railways. What is the difference of a railway captain and a water captain and an air captain? I didn't know this as well. I said, sorry, sir, I don't know any answer. Although I didn't answer this question as well. What is the meaning of this question? I didn't understand it completely. So I avoided answering this question, which I didn't understand. Then he asked me engineering related question. He asked me, prefab सुना है, क्या होता है? Though I said, sir, no, I don't know what is prefab. So he extended the abbreviation. He told me it's prefabricated. So I then told him that, sir, I don't know what is prefabricated. Then he said, तुम तो electrical engineer हो, तुम्हें तो पता होना चाहिए. Then he asked me the last question. He asked me that, see, why do electrical engineering engineers go for the computer software engineering after completing their graduation? What is the logic behind this? So I told him, sir, there is lack of employment for electrical engineers in private sector. All the employments are concentrated in the public sector, that too through gate examination or through any other competitive examination. So here his part was ended. So the third member in the panel, he was a very calm scholar, and he asked me a lot of interesting questions related to history, current affairs, law, and whatnot. So he started with asking me, so you answered Chaubey sir that what is minimum government, maximum governance. But can you tell me that how was it visible in COVID-19? So I gave him an example that people were able to manage their own problems in the COVID period, and the power was devolved to the lowest level of the panchayat or so on and so forth. Then he asked me, but government. Then he counter questioned me that the government was actually controlling everything. Your lockdown period was one of the example when the government was actually monitoring the movement of the people. So how can you say it is not restrictive in nature, and it is maximum governance. So I gave him some examples of NGOs, civil services organizations, where the government gave them full freedom to do it. Then he went on an entirely different track and asked me a question on history. So he asked me that you are a student of history, so it is generally said that history repeats itself. So, do you think that the current Russian-Ukraine crisis, like Russia-Ukraine war, it might lead to World War II? It will lead to World War II. So, oh no, it's such a beautiful question he asked me. You need to read between the lines to answer this question. So I answered him after taking a 10-second pause. That's a Although history always repeats itself, but it is very difficult to say in this case whether history will repeat itself. History may repeat itself in the Russia Ukraine crisis. Then he chuckled at me and he said, a very diplomatic answer you gave to me. Now tell me, if it may lead to the World War II scenario, then how it may lead to the World War scenario. So I gave him examples of this Cold War era when the Russia US bloc was formed, and similar things are happening between NATO and the Russia here, and Ukraine is in between. So I gave him some examples and I explained it to him that it how it can lead to World War II, that Russia China axis was formed in Cold War period. Now Russia is making another axis against the NATO. So that's how I answered it. Then again he asked a question on history. Now he's now said that now you are a student of history. Now you tell me, what do you think? Is the liberalism getting erased from the world? If it yes and no, then how? So I told him, sir, I don't think that liberalism is getting erased from the world. I rather say that that it is getting diluted in the world, and it's not getting diluted homogeneously and equally all around the world. There are disparities and there are inequalities in the dilution of the liberalism as well, depending on the government. For example, Chinese government is very dictatorial in its nature, while the Indian government is democratic. So, uh, then he asked me, okay, this is a good answer, but can you give me another example? So I gave him an example of climate change, where the developing countries and the developed countries have a tussle, and developing countries want to develop on fossil fuel, knowing that it is self-centered. So he asked me one last question. No, the second last question he asked me now. Now he went on to a different note altogether. Now he asked a low question. So he asked me, "Have you heard of this Wade versus Jude case?" I told him, "Yes, sir. It is given by the Honorable Supreme Court of the United States, and it's related to the pregnancy rights of the woman." Then he asked me, "Don't you think that this judgment, that now the question to reverse this judgment will be against liberalism?" So I said, "Sir, yes, it will be against liberalism if passed, if it is reversed. The Wade versus Jude case is a landmark judgment, and if it is reversed, then it will be against liberalism." Then he asked me the one last question. Okay, Lakshay, tell me. This is about United States Supreme Court. Tell me one judgment of Indian Supreme Court which you think is against liberalism. Then I took around, I think, 10 to 15 seconds pause, and I answered him that, sir, I think 1962 case of Kedarnath Singh versus Union of India, where the section 124A of IPC was held constitutional, can be considered as going against liberalism. So he stopped here, and he let the other member, he passed me to the other member, and he just smiled at me. He said, "Very good. Now the other next member will ask the questions." So the member three, she's a very he is a very calm person again. I think he was a civil servant, and he asked me some very relevant question related to my hobbies. So he said, Lakshay, you write letters, you have so many hobbies, and these many hobbies, people can, three, four people can have these many hobbies together. So, you write letters? Whom do you write letters to? So I told him, sir, anyone I can write letter to. And then he asked me, do you send them by post? I told him, sir, sometimes I send them by post, sometimes I mail them. Then um, then he asked me, how does it feel writing letters? So I told him my personal experience is that when I write letters to someone, the other person is also actually nudged to write me back. So that's there. Now then he asked me something related to poetry. So he said that you read world literature, it is very very vast, can you complete one line for me? So I said, sure sir, I can try. Then he, and this is a coincidence, this is a luck also, that he put forward towards me one of my favorite couplets, one of the line of my favorite couplets. So he asked me, जिंदगी क्या है अनासिर में ज़ुहूर है तरतीब. Then I replied to him immediately, मौत क्या है इन्हीं अज्जा का परेशान होना. So this is a line by Chakbast, Bridgenarayan Chakbast, a very renowned Urdu poet, and this line comes right in front of right in the beginning of Masan movie. So it's one of my favorite quotes of shades. So I remembered it. That's good. No. Yeah. Then he asked me about that. You worked here as part-time tutor. Tell me about it. How much revenue did this startup generate? What was your job? How many students did you teach? And also, Then he asked me, have you heard of NCLT? Uh, then I answered him, that's sir, it's a National Company Law Tribunal. Then he asked me more question, that what does it do, how does it function, is there any procedure? I told him that it is involved in debt restructuring, and then insolvency and bankruptcy code IBC 2016 established it, and there is an SOP of function where IBBI and NCLAT are also part of it. So this is all that I answered to him. Then he asked me, what which is the Central Bank of India? Then I told him that it's Reserve Bank of India. And then he said, who, which bank? So I said, the Reserve Bank of India. Then he said, wrong. But Chaube sir interrupted in between, and he said, he is right in his answer, but the member then admitted his mistake, and the member said, sorry, I think I heard some other bank's name. So Chaube sir saved me here. He got the right answer, but this member, he misread my answer, misheard my answer. Um, then he asked me one question from physics. What is radioactivity? I told him that it is emission of radio waves due to high shelf life, like radium and all, because of the huge size of the atomic structure. Then he asked me, how does it happen? Then I told him about the fission between the subatomic particles like electrons and neutrons. Then he asked me, why only some elements show radioactivity and others don't show? Then I told him about the size of the atom, that the bigger the size of the atom, the more possibility that it can be radioactive and all, because of the loosening of the electrons and hence more mobility. So atoms with higher atomic number show more radioactivity. Then he said, okay, now thank you. Now the ma'am will ask. So there was this lady member, a very famous and renowned historian of India, Professor Upinder Singh, who asked me some really great questions, and it was a fan moment for me to talk to her. Fan moment, because I am being a history student. I always fascinated the great historians of India and around the world. So the first question she asked me is that you talked about NCLT. Did you know? Do you know about bad banks and how do they function? Then I told her about bad banks, and she asked me, when was the bad bank first established? I told her that it was established in this place and this time. Then she asked me that will establishment of bad bank lead to NCLT being obsolete? So I told her, no ma'am, bad banks are on still on the initial phase, and there is a lot of positivity in the market regarding NCLT, and they are able to recover the loans better than the any other system of debt restructuring. So since there is a large number of cases pending, I don't think NCLT will be redundant in any time soon. Then she asked me, how do you determine what will be the haircut on the insolvency? So I told her that it depends on the geo-economic indicators such as war, trade, money, capital market, inflation, etc. Then she went on to my deaf suddenly and she asked me, "Oh, you like learning languages. So, what all languages do you know?" So, I told her that I know Hindi, English, Urdu, Persian, and little bit of Japanese. So, then she asked me, "Okay, so you tell me in which of the language the constants or vowels are same? In which of the language the constants or vowel are the same?" So I told her, "Ma'am, it's Sanskrit." So she said, "No, no, tell me some non-Indian language." So I said, "Ma'am, I don't know, sorry." So she told me that it's Korean. So I thanked her, and then she moved on to ask me the next question. It was related to history. She asked me that recently there was a demolition of monuments going on all around the world, across the globe. Do you support these kind of demolition so as to change the history that you don't like? Then I answered her that, "Ma'am, with due respect, I don't think demolition of monument in any situation is correct. If you want to change the history, you can change the history by providing with facts and the figures, and continuous analysis of history is needed. People have analyzed history again and again. One thing which is true today cannot be true in tomorrow based on some new evidences that we might find, and the historians might get out of some places like numismatics, archaeology, or something else. So rather than demolishing monuments, we should search for these evidences which can be backed by history." Then she said, "Okay, you have a bright mind and you have cleared so many exams. You can be anything. You can be a great historian someday, maybe. And historians are very well respected in the society. Then why do you want to be an IFS officer, foreign service officer?" So I told her very humorously that, "Ma'am, with due respect, every year 30,000 people become historians, completing their PhDs in India, but only 30 people become diplomats, cracking foreign service examination or the civil services examination." So she laughed at it, and then we moved forward. And then she asked me that why was UN established. I told her about the functions of peace and stability and the infrastructure development in a multilateral and globalized way. Then she asked me what about other functions. So I told her about the humanitarian peacekeeping missions, administrative supports to the governments, some many affiliated organizations like FAO, UNICEF, etc., etc. And then she asked me one last question. She asked me that whether United Nations has been able to secure the peace in the world. So I gave her a very balanced answer. I told her, "Ma'am, it varied. By and large, United Nations has been able to keep the peace intact in the world. It has involved itself in many multilateral and bilateral conflicts around the world, such as the Somalian War or the post-Khmer Cambodia, post-apartheid Africa, where it was able to maintain and consolidate the democratic government. But there has been instances like the Arab Springs, like the Saudi Arabia war, when one of the on the Iran war, Iran Iraq war, when one of the parties supported by the P5 members were biasly supported in the United Nations. And there was an instant when the United States, without getting the consent of the United States Security Council, attacked Iraq in 2011. So it's a mixed situation. However, uh, I think it's growing day by day, and the peacekeeping missions are also increasing. The budget has increased threefold in last 3 decades. So I believe that it will definitely be a very strategic and very decisive organization in ensuring peace in the world. Then she told me that, thank you so much, Lakshay. I'm done with my questions. Now Chobe sir, back to Chobe sir. Chobe sir then asked me, so Lakshay, we have asked every question that we could have asked. Now if you have any question to ask us, you can ask any question. So I said, no sir, I'm very happy that I came here and I got to learn a lot. Then he said, you felt relaxed na? I said, yes sir, I feel very relaxed, super relaxed. I said, super relaxed. So he said, okay, it was good talking to you, Lakshmi. You are an asset to the nation. Take good care of yourself. You may go now. So then I left the room, and this is how the interview went. Now, some key takeaways from my interview experience. This was my first UPSC interview, second attempt. First means I believe that no matter which word you are getting, what matters is your patience and your composure, your calm. There were many instances where I didn't know the answer. Even I did not understand the demand of the question. It is always good to avoid these kind of questions. Just apologize that you don't know the answer and move forward. You will not be judged based on the question that you did not answer. You will be judged only based on the question that you answered. Second thing is that when you go in and enter the UPSC interview room, be polite, be very honest, be humble. These these people, they carry immense experience. Five people there are which has age between 50 years to 60 years. Imagine 250 to 300 years of experience in front of you. The moment you become dishonest, they will catch it like this. So try to be very honest with everything that you have to say. And lastly, it is not about the knowledge, it is all about some sort of luck also, that what kind of mood they are in, what kind of board you are getting, what kind of questions are getting thrown at you. So it's all about luck, but it's also about your ability to change your luck. Sometimes you don't know the questions answers. It's very good to know, to reply the answers very humorously. People always love the people who makes them smile. So if you don't know the answer, try to make something politely which is also humorous, and which can impact the other person. After you are out of the interview board, they don't remember any of the answer. They always remember one or two important things that you did in the interview, and based on that they will mark you. So this is all, I think. All the very best. Don't think about anything, just be yourself. Don't think about the coaching institutes as well. The coaching institutes, they mislead sometimes. One coaching institute you will go, they will say you will get 200 marks. Other you will go, they will say you will get 150 marks. They don't know, it depends on the board now. So if you are getting board A, it's very different from board B. You are the same person. Don't listen to what the coaching institute has to say. Just go give mock interviews just for being acclimatized to that situation, being comfortable sitting in the interview room, just for that, not for the knowledge. You have enough knowledge, you have cleared the means. All the very best.